Welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and something St. Louis Arch close to the water. That's been on my mind all.
That's all you've been thinking about?
That's all I've been thinking about is how close the St. Louis Arch is to the water.
I want to say it's only like 10 feet.
It actually goes over the river, Bradley, so you can drop straight out of the
straight down, right? Yeah, perfect.
You know, I was fucking insufferable to watch The Last Percy Jackson with because I used to live in Illinois, right? I lived about an hour and a half-ish from St. Louis, and so we used to go to the Arch all the time, and so we kept having to pause the episode for me to be like, yeah, no, I think that's the actual museum that's under the Arch. I couldn't tell you if it was, accurate. I don't think they filmed it in there, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Right. I feel like it was a recreation of the actual Arch.
I feel like it was a recreation, but it was a pretty damn accurate recreation. Like, the top of the Arch, it actually does feel like that to be in it. Speaking of things that are perfectly balanced, I don't know where that segue was going. I am bad at podcasting. Ahsoka! We're doing more Ahsoka. This is what we're doing. There are no real Star Wars TV show or movie announcements. We will keep you abreast when they are. The Rey movie's going to start filming later this year. I guess that's the closest we're getting. Men on Twitter are mad about this.
As they should be.
Yes, cry bitches. No, men on Twitter are being mad about things the director said again and the existence of the movie again. And they're being... The funniest one for me was some dude who was like... Basically his overarching point, I'm paraphrasing, but his overarching point was, I've never seen a female Star Wars fan in my spaces, so they must not be real. And I'm like, dude, if you're not seeing any female Star Wars fans, it's because they don't want to fucking be around you. Right. You tell it on yourself there, buddy. You are broadcasting that you are repulsive and unlikable, and all of your community is repulsive and unlikable to the entire internet. This is not the flex you think it is. Before we get into the episode, we have not a thing that Charles fucked up, but a thing that Charles kind of glazed over in the last episode, and he feels like he needs to explain further. So, in the last episode of the Dave Filoni show, I was talking about the planet named Arcana, which is the name of the planet on which Ahsoka finds the orb. And I just kind of glazed over and I said it's sort of related to, like, magical shit. We move on.
Sure.
It's actually a little more complicated than that. So I have here the Merriam-Webster dictionary for the word arcanum, pluralized as arcana. And according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it comes from the Latin word arcanus, meaning secret. And the actual definition is a mysterious or specialized knowledge, language, or information accessible or possessed only by the initiate, usually used in the plural. So I thought that was a little more deep than just it's related to magic shit.
Right.
Also, apparently, I'm not super familiar with this, but I'm certain some of our listeners are. The second thing that popped up when I googled Arcana was an article on the major Arcana, which are apparently the named or numbered cards in a tarot deck.
Wow, so that's such a fun segue because I was going to spring this on you as a joke, but then now that you just said that, now I actually want to do this bit. So in honor of the title of the episode this week, which is Toil and Trouble, I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I did a tarot reading for you real quick because it's the new year and it would be like a little magic. Do you even know
how to do tarot readings?
Well, we're going to do a quick version because this is a podcast and we don't have all day. So, and since this is not a visual medium, they're not going to be able to see all the stuff. So we'll do a one card draw kind of situation.
I am learning a shocking new thing about you.
So here's the thing. I want you to form a question in your mind for the year. Like, let's say for the new year, like, start the question off with a what. So something along the lines like, what do I need to know about blank? Or what do I need to do to do blank? Just think of a question like that.
Gonna pick a Star Wars related one because this is a Star Wars show.
Sure. You don't have to tell me, but you got it.
Okay, I got it in my head.
Okay. So I've been shuffling the cards. So I'm going to split the deck now and we're going to see what Let's see if it has anything to do with anything. Maybe it's just bullshit. Who knows? We'll find out. I don't know. Maybe I'm a Night Sister and we'll find out. Okay. Or maybe this will go the exact way that card reading on Fox News went a couple of days ago. So if you know, you know. Okay.
And you should
So
know it's really fucking funny.
let me find the card. I have a little book because I haven't memorized all the cards because I'm not psychic. That would be great though if I was, because then I could
It
just.
would make my life. It would certainly make talking about Star Wars news a little bit easier if you were psychic. If you could just intuit what was happening over at Lucasfilm.
If those interested at home want to get the same tarot deck as me, it's called the Wild Unknown Tarot deck. This is not a plug. This is the one I'm using. So if you're curious about the definition of this card. So you pulled the Eight of Wands. I'm gonna hold it up so you can see what it looks like.
Okay.
Pretty,
It's
right?
kind of so down at the bottom. It's almost kind of evoking a campfire. Down at the bottom, most of the card is black, but down at the bottom, there's sort of a white circular patch that sort of radiates out. It kind of looks like light, and then there is what appears to be seven just black sticks, presumably wands, and an eighth sort of green one that has sort of yellow and orange and red coming off of it, kind of like a lightning bolt, a singular lightning bolt.
It's kind of a rainbow lightning bolt, actually.
It
So
kind of
it's you
is. It's
know what?
half a
So
rainbow.
maybe
If you count the green, it's like 2/3 of a rainbow.
yeah. So there we go. Okay. So here's what it means:
Yeah.
sudden movement or change.
Oh dear.
Okay.
Oh dear.
And it says the description says the Eight of Wands strikes the lightning. It's a card of new change or clarity in an unresolved situation. You might hear from an old friend out of the blue or receive some surprising news that shifts the direction of your course. This card sometimes means literal movement is on the horizon, so be ready to travel if the opportunity arises.
So Bradley, you want to know what my question was?
Yes.
What can I expect from Star Wars media in 2024?
Oh,
So I think if your tarot reading is accurate, then we're in for some exciting news breaking in 2024. Possibly some revelations about the future of Star Wars. I mentioned the Rey movie might start filming. We might find some things out.
you know what? I think I might be a Night Sister, Charles. I think it might,
We'll
might be.
see. We'll
We'll
have to see
see.
over the course of the
Right.
year.
We'll see if my powers are real as we progress throughout the year.
uh, but rather like sudden change or discovering knowledge, we are going into the Ahsoka, the show. That look, my some days my segues are great. Some days my segues are fantastic. Some days my segues are ass garbage. This is just one of those days, apparently.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Ahsoka, you want to tell us about the episode we're talking about today?
This week we're talking about Ahsoka episode 2, part 2, titled Toil and Trouble. Ahsoka and General Hera Syndulla travel to the New Republic shipyards and make an unexpected discovery. Charles, what is one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
I really liked the focus on our main three characters over on the protagonist side. We got a little handful of scenes with Balin and Shin and Morgan. But I did like how much, because these three characters are going to be so important over the course of the next 6 episodes, we got a little time with Sabine. We got a little time with Ahsoka by herself. We got a little time with Hera, who granted was with Ahsoka most of the time. But I also do like that Hera has so much of a presence in this episode because she's gonna kind of stop being a presence as much, like especially in the last 2 episodes or so. Her role in this series overall really is to just kind of prepare us for what is coming next. But I do like that she got a moment to be Hera Syndulla in this episode. Also loved the presence of Chopper. I did love that. One thing I didn't like about this episode, the central mystery rang a little hollow to me. It kind of felt like they sort of show up, they get the information tells them a thing, and then they proceed from there. There wasn't really much mystery to the shipyards. There wasn't really much like that we were sort of trying to figure out. I guess that wasn't the point, but I was kind of struck a little bit this episode how much technobabble was being used to kind of explain why they're at the shipyard. Also, I kind of got this a little bit too with the droid head. Like there's a lot of technobabble to explain why Sabine basically can pull the memory core of this droid that Ahsoka decapitated. And I'm like, I would rather we just focus solely on the characters. I would rather we try not to throw these things in here for whoever is writing the visual guide to this, or for people on the internet to try to have to figure out or rationalize or explain. Like, at this point, let's just tell the story. So that was one thing that I disliked. Bradley, what was one thing you liked and one thing you did not?
The one thing that I liked about this episode, I really did love the return of Chopper. I thought that that was the brightest spot in this episode was Chopper's return, only because I don't know if this is just I just started noticing this, or maybe it's just like I had just rewatched Rebels and now I'm watching this and it's just now my brain is trained to hear it. But every time Chopper spoke in this episode, I completely understood what he was saying in English in my head.
Oh,
100%.
100%. Exactly the same.
I,
I
I
can I can hear Chopper now. I can understand Chopper
perfectly.
now.
Like I was like, do I know binary? Like I was like, I like a savant of Star Wars? Like, do I just know how droids speak now? Like, what is going on? Like, anyway, I love Chopper. He was
For
amazing.
for our listeners who maybe don't know, there is somebody actually voicing Chopper. That is not. We're not going to talk about who that is because for all of Rebels, Chopper is credited as himself. And
Right?
only in the final episode of Rebels do they reveal who has been voicing Chopper the entire time.
That's so funny.
So I'm not going to reveal who it is. It's because I think people should go back and watch Rebels because it really is a fantastic reveal of who has actually been the voice of Chopper for 4 seasons. But yes, Chopper is speaking like English.
Like straight up English.
You
Like I
can
knew
you can
exactly what he was saying.
understand if you learn to listen to him, you can understand what he's saying.
It was so good. I
It's
mean, the
great.
writing for it was just fantastic. Anyway, that's what I loved. What I didn't like was, I mean, I'll be honest, this entire episode was just an extension of episode one and should have just been an extra long episode one, really. If you really wanted to break it down, you could have like done the whole, Sabine getting stabbed, so she's out of commission, and now we have to go over to Corellia to go do this other stuff. Like, I don't know. I just felt like it was just like they stretched out this second episode longer when it didn't really need to be that long. I mean, really, all the action is just in the shipyard, and it's really only, a few seconds long. It's not that dramatic and it's not that interesting, honestly. And none of it means anything at the end of the day. So it's like, other than we know where we need to go. They spent the whole entire episode of just figuring out like what's the next place we need to go. And it's like, I don't know. I didn't like how stretched out it was. I felt like it was a little bit unnecessary of an episode where they could have added another episode on the back end that would have benefited the plot a little bit more.
Alrighty, well, before we get into the actual content of the episode itself, I would be remiss to mention the title. Yeah, the episode title is Toil and Trouble, a reference to the Toil and Trouble line from the Scottish play, which it's Macbeth. It's from Macbeth. It's a very obvious reference to Macbeth. It's delivered by the three witches in that play. The fact that there's three witches is almost certainly a reference to something later on in the episode in the series, but we'll get to it when we get to it. That's almost certainly what this is. Macbeth is actually one of my favorite plays by Shakespeare, so this title did make me happy. It may be my favorite out of his tragedies. I think I may like it the best.
I like how you're like, I like this is my favorite comedy, this is my favorite tragedy, this is my
Well, they're
favorite.
very different, Bradley. Much Ado About Nothing has a very different tone to Macbeth. You can't really compare the two.
Did you see the new movie?
I did not see the new movie, but I
Oh,
would
okay.
like to see the new movie.
Okay.
Um,
Just because I mean my only thing I've heard about that movie is this is not that great of a movie, although they're both hot as fuck, so this is a great movie.
this is what you get when you get your media analysis from gay people.
Yeah.
Was the movie good? I don't know. But Barry Keoghan and Jacob Elordi are hot, so
Oh, I'm talking about Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney.
I know. I'm talking about Saltburn.
Is that also based on that?
No, it's not.
Oh,
Not even remotely close. I just know all the gays are talking about Saltburn right now.
Oh, I'm talking about how literally the new Sydney Sweeney movie, it's like it is a remake of Much to Do About Nothing. Or it's based on Much to Do About Nothing.
Really? I did not
Yes.
know that. I
Oh,
did
that's why
not
I
know
thought you
that.
knew that. That's why I was like, why else did I bring this up?
I thought you were talking about the latest Macbeth movie with, I
Oh,
think,
no, no, no,
Denzel
no.
Washington.
No, 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 no. I'm talking about the literal romance comedy, something. What is it called? It's called like yes, the movie's called Anyone But You. So I
Oh,
guess
that movie.
yeah,
I
it's
saw the
a
trailer
take
for
on.
that movie. It did not give.
Yeah, she said
Mm.
in I think she was talking to Kelly Clarkson or something, and she was like, "Yeah, it's based on the Shakespeare play, Much Ado About Nothing." Da 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 da. Da. And I was like,
It's almost certainly based on the Benedict and Beatrice subplot,
right, it's
which
like
is
enemies to
the best
lovers or
thing.
something, right?
Yeah, it's the original like enemies to lovers in
Got it.
popular
Okay.
culture. Like I don't want to sit here and explain the plot of Much Ado About Nothing to you because one of us in our major had to take a Shakespeare class and it wasn't you. So I actually had to take a Shakespeare class. I actually didn't mind it. We had a very good professor who finally, after 20 something years, made me like Hamlet. But this is not a Shakespeare podcast. But that is the discussion of the title of the episode. Bradley, you want to take us into Ahsoka, season 1, episode 2, part 2, Toil and Trouble.
Section 1. We begin with Sabine recovering from her lightsaber wound. She informs Ahsoka that the assassin droids that attacked her took her data pad with the star map findings. Meanwhile, Balin and Shin travel to a sacred ruin site on the planet Cetos. Title card, Part 2, Toil and Trouble.
We get a medical droid back.
I
Yay! I
thought
love
that
the
was
medical
so funny.
droids.
I love seeing him. First of all, I loved Huyang and him in the corner, kind of like going over Sabine's like medical records or whatever the fuck they were doing. I just love that he's so involved in her recovery process that he was just like, make sure you get that right, medical droid. I just need to make sure that she's getting the right medications and things.
It's very like having a nurse or a doctor as your parent or your partner, and then you have to go in for medical care, and then they want to
Right.
have a bunch of conversations with the provider about like, now are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing this? And I'm like, just let them work, please. So my partner is a nurse, and they actually do have medical droids. Fun fact. Yeah, these are things that actually exist.
Oh,
Like they're very limited in what they can do. I'm not 100% sure what they do. He will just occasionally send me video of these robots wandering up and down the hall at his
interesting.
last job, and I'm like,
What do
babe,
they do?
that's a CIS tactical droid.
I was
That
like,
looks
what?
exactly like a CIS tactical
What do
droid.
they
You need
do?
to get out of there. I don't 100% know. I just know that is a thing that you will sometimes see
That's so
on
funny.
medical floors is robots going around
Just doing
delivering
work.
things or
Yeah.
yeah, you can actually see this. So we're not too far off from this medical droid that we see.
I guess not. I mean, literally, the last time I saw a robot in real life was there. I go to this one sushi place and they have a robot that delivers your drinks to you. And it's like a little droid. He just delivers your drink. You just put in what drinks you want and the thing, and then he just brings out your fucking Sprite. And you're just like, thanks. And then there's literally, they talk too. Like, so if you're standing in the way of it, like it'll tell you, it's like, please get out of my way. I don't want to get fired. Like, it's so
we
funny.
have we have the like little cart droids
Oh,
that will
for like
move
grocery deliveries.
for
Yep.
like grocery deliveries.
Yep.
So I'll go out like after this. I'm almost certainly going to go write, and there, like as I'm walking up to the coffee shop where I write, there is an almost certain chance that at some point I will pass one of these droids out on a delivery. See, they're technically robots, but I keep calling them droids.
That's
It's
so
crazy.
hilarious. I
It's
hope we
crazy.
adapt that in our vernacular in the future. We
I'm
just always
trying
call
to
them
make it
droids.
happen. Look, if I have to live in a robotic future, which I have complicated thoughts on and we do not have time to get into today, then I might as well be able to call them droids. Also, sentient ones deserve rights and should be treated the same as people.
Okay, back to the actual show. I I have
And
a
now we are
problem.
finally tangenting back to the
Right.
show.
I have a problem with Sabine's lightsaber wound slash like the fact that it even happened. And I only wanted to bring it up in this episode only because now she's healed from it by the end of the
Okay.
episode.
It felt
Um,
insensitive to do it last week.
yeah, because it's too fresh. But also, I didn't really want to go into this whole tirade at the end of the episode because I feel like we wouldn't have we've had way too
Okay.
much time. I don't think that emotionally the stabbing is enough for her character to overcome like what she needs to come or to have loss of some kind or something. I think she should have had her hand cut off or her arm
Of
cut off.
course you do.
Now, I say that only because we're coming right off of the Darth Vader comics. And what does he say in the comics? And he says, I need to teach them real loss and a real lesson. So I'm going to cut off anybody body part that I can. Also, I think it just would have given Sabine a really cool look if she had like a robot hand.
Maybe at like the end of the season or like a season 2. I think we're too early in the show for that.
Yeah.
Is I think it would be cool to have her have like a Mandalorian designed like robot hand, and maybe the
Yeah.
robot hand has like weapons in it.
That's what I'm saying. I want
Because
something
it's
cool. Yeah.
I mean, storytelling wise, it depends on how it's employed. Like, I think it would be too early in the show.
Sure.
But as a person who, you know what they'd fucking do, Bradley. You know what they'd fucking do. If they gave Sabine a mechanical hand, you know exactly what they'd fucking do with it. You know what they'd put in that hand.
What, spray paint?
A fucking flamethrower.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something like, oh, well, since she's an artist, they're going to put like paint. She's going to have like a paint arm thing where now she can
Actually,
make
that
artwork
would be
with her paint.
actually that'd be fucking rad.
It would
No,
be spray paint
you know
guns
what?
in her hand.
I've changed my mind. I love this. Have Sabine get her arm sliced off, Star Wars style, and then give her a cool, sick ass fucking artist hand to where she can use spray paint as a weapon and also paint stuff.
Yeah,
But then like it's a normal hand, so she can still fight. I
sure.
love that.
Yeah, there you go. I'm just trying to be
I
creative.
love that. No, it feels like to me I've arrived at a different place through the same like thought process, because I'm like, I don't mind that it was getting stabbed specifically, and like, yeah, she got over it like in this episode. Now I kind of feel like in hindsight it was sort of a way to just take her out for an episode.
Right. That's
It was
what I mean.
very
It's like,
it was very we don't know what to do with her for this episode. We want to have Hera be the one to go to the shipyard with Ahsoka. So I don't know. Sabine gets stabbed and has to sit there and have a conversation with Hu Yang, which is a really good conversation. We'll get to it.
yeah, it just seems like a little weird that like they
I
just
don't know.
sidelined her for no reason. And
They sidelined her so she could have her little conversation, and like she still participates in the plot, but in hindsight it does feel very much like they didn't know what to do with her at Corellia, and she was like, well, she can't go. I guess she's getting stabbed instead.
Right.
And like Sabine's the type of character to where if she'd just been told like you can't go, she's gonna sneak on board a ship and go. Like that's just who she is. Speaking of who she is, Ahsoka has this line where she tells Sabine that like you've done enough. And I found it really interesting because I feel like these two characters have different interpretations of this line. I think what Ahsoka is trying to say is that Sabine has contributed as much as she's physically able to, and it would be best if she rests. What Sabine heard was, you've screwed everything up.
Right.
We cannot have you making the situation worse. So I just found it really interesting that even that one line, stopping to think about it, has double meanings, and it means different things to the characters. And Ahsoka's not just being bitchy at Sabine. Like
Right.
there's
Right. Yeah.
there's layers here. There's a fundamental miscommunication between these two characters. And that is the core emotional story of this show, is undoing these miscommunications that Ahsoka has made towards Sabine.
Yeah.
And
'Cause
I
it's just in the delivery. It's
it's
you've
in the
done
delivery.
Yeah. You've done enough. It's fine. Or you've done enough. Like you just gotta like it's however you say it. And then she just took it the wrong way.
We are on the planet of Cetos. We've never been to Cetos before. This is a new thing.
I like it. I'm calling it like the fall or the autumn planet, since all the trees are like
The
red.
autumn planet.
Right. It's just constantly in the state of being in the month of autumn. Like it's just like
Well, it's a
or
very
August.
cool visual design because it's
Yeah.
the planet. It should be very dark, but because it's got the white clouds, like the color palette of the planet is very dark and very muted, but it's still very well lit. And it has the red to keep it from being boring. And also, red being sort of a central thematic color to a certain group of people who are heavily involved in the plot of this show.
They keep hinting at that. It's really good. I don't notice it until you point it out, but I'm like, oh,
They
there it
keep
is. Yeah.
hinting and explicitly saying
Right.
and identifying them by name.
Right. You wonder why they only wear red outfits. Well, it's because all the trees wherever they used to live are always red, and then all their statues are always red, and like
It's almost like there's central color motifs of red and white and black in this
yeah,
particular culture. Anyway, they show up to what looks like Stonehenge,
sure. I
uh,
like it.
which I like. It invokes that sense of ancientness and unknowingness. Of course, there's thousands of conspiracy theories about Stonehenge.
Well, now my conspiracy is that the Night Sisters originated in Stonehenge.
Yes, the Night Sisters came from their different distant galaxy to Earth
Right. Well, because
in
if in the universe of Star Wars, it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we are just at the in a different galaxy in a more modern time. Therefore, the Night Sisters had to have made their way here at some point, and they ended up at Stonehenge.
Sure, I buy this completely. My final note for this opening sequence is it took me an embarrassing number of rewatches to figure out that when Balin hears what sounds like weird force noises, it's actually weird Purgle noises, and you can get your first glimpse at live action Purgle silhouetted in the clouds.
I thought it was weird though that they didn't like maybe it's just too loosely hinted at that it's a Purgle. Like, I mean, they don't really heavy-handed show you that it's a Purgle. They're like, oh, it's clearly whales. Like, they just kind of go, he's looking up, he sees kind of the silhouette, and you're just like, oh, is it? But they don't like confirm it until obviously I want to say it's the next episode, but
I believe it is the next episode that they're going to
yeah,
confirm that the Purgle are here. It's either the next one or the one after.
right.
I think it's the
Even,
next one that
yeah,
they're going to
I think
confirm
so.
that the Purgle.
Well, maybe in a slightly future scene, they do show it on the little star map, but other than that, I don't think that's a confirmed.
Yes, and I have a note about the Purgle being on the star map.
Section 2. Ahsoka heads to Sabine's home to investigate when she is attacked by an assassin droid. She returns to the hospital with the droid's head, where Sabine is able to extract information from it. This gives them a lead to Corellia, where Ahsoka recalls Morgan used to have factories. Hera makes plans to meet Ahsoka on Corellia.
So my first question when I started watching the scene was like, wait, is not Hera, is Ahsoka using psychometry here? So I went to look.
I think so. Yeah.
And the answer is apparently yes.
Doesn't I think Wikipedia says Force Echo or something? What
So
is it?
Force Sense Echo and Force Echo are the terms that are used for it in Jedi Fallen Order.
Oh, okay. So interesting. So maybe that's just a more recent term. Oh, yeah, because it changes to psychometry.
Psychometry. So
Psychometry.
psychometry is a rare force power that will allow Jedi to actually like experience an echo. It's usually done in the form of voices, hearing voices from the past, but sometimes it can be visibly seen. Well, it first turned up in Legends, in a novel we don't talk about called The Courtship of Princess Leia, but it's most prominently known for being the power that Quinlan Vos has. And it's a power that
Oh,
only certain Jedi possess. Quinlan Vos being one of the major ones who actually possessed it. We saw him use it in the Clone Wars, and we saw him use it again in Dark Disciple. The other big Jedi that we know that has this power is Cal Kestis, who uses it in both Jedi games. Ahsoka, to my knowledge, had never used it prior to this point, but
right.
now I guess she can do it because that's what she's doing, and she will do it in later episodes.
Now, with Quinlan, he has to touch the object, right?
Yeah.
Or is it okay? So it's slightly
So
different here because she's kind
Quinlan
of more
has
just
to
using the
touch.
space.
Quinlan has to touch the object. Cal Kestis can kind of run his hand close to the object and get the same effect. I guess Ahsoka, like we'll see later on, Ahsoka will touch an object and
Right.
get something from it. But apparently this is also what she's using. There's a book called Force Collector that was a lead up to the Rise of Skywalker, because I think Rey also uses this in Rise of Skywalker. There's a book called Force Collector, and the entire premise of the book was basically this guy going around using psychometry to experience the events of the first 8 movies. There was
Oh,
basically a giant like
I mean, I
lead
guess
up.
that's one way to do it.
Yeah, and I mean the book was fine. The book was okay.
Was
I
he a
read
news
it.
reporter or something? Like, what
No, he
was
was
the
like
whole
this
point?
kid. It's a YA book, so it's like this
Oh,
kid who
okay.
wants to be a Jedi, who's going around and doing all of this stuff.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's what Ahsoka is doing here. She is using psychometry, which, to my knowledge, she had never been able to use before, but I guess she can use it now.
I feel like Ahsoka is now the end all be all for any new force power. So if they ever want to introduce something or they ever want to be like, what's a new thing that we want force people to do? They'll just be like, okay, Ahsoka can do it. Because then that way we can just introduce it as Ahsoka doing it and then just be like, yep, she's just like the master of everything.
I wonder if Ahsoka being able to use these different things that she couldn't previously use. I wonder if that has to do with how she's more in tune with the Force. Like, this was a thing. I wonder how many Jedi can actually use psychometry that, because of the training
Mm,
of the Jedi Order, they've never discovered they've been able to use, because Quinlan Voss is kind of a maverick.
right.
Like, he's kind of a guy who operates
Slightly
outside,
outside, yeah.
like outside of the Jedi boundaries. And Cal Kestis develops his psychometry when he's on the run, when he's outside of the Jedi Order. And now Ahsoka, being outside the bounds of the Jedi Order, is somebody who can also use it. So I wonder if more Jedi could have used psychometry if the Order weren't so rigidly structured, because these are people that have to be more fluid and more open to the Force.
Yeah, I think you're on the money with that because I think Ahsoka, because she's not confined to the rules anymore. It's not that she's doing necessarily like quote unquote dark side stuff or anything, but she's like doing stuff that wasn't taught originally, or she's discovering things that maybe the Jedi had forgotten about or just said that wasn't important enough to learn or teach kids or something. And so now she can just kind of learn whatever she wants to learn and just that it is what it is because she can just connect with the Force. And I think later on, I don't know at what section it's in, but maybe I actually think it's the very last section where Balin says something about Ahsoka's kind of looseness in the Force, and he's like, I can't really see where she is, or I can't really
She's
track her.
elusive.
Right.
Yeah, it's the
So
last
something
scene.
along those lines.
My next note is Merle is the best cat. There's no broader point that I want to make about this. I
Good.
want people to think about Merle and how good of a cat he is.
I also think that this was a missed opportunity from Dave Filoni to not have Merle in every single episode and constantly with them the entire time.
I also agree, and I think Merle should have been there the entire time. However, I also do like the idea that after they leave Lothal, Merle's just sort of hanging out. Like,
Yeah.
the thing about Merle being able to get out of the tower is presumably he can also get back in.
Sure.
So now that Sabine's gone, this is Merle's house. This is Merle's tower. Merle salt burned his way into owning.
To owning the communications tower.
Yep. Oh my
love
lord.
it.
So we get this scene in the hospital. This is a very Star Wars Rebels scene when she's creating the thing, just the way that the dialogue is written and the way that the characters interact with each other. It's very Rebels timing and how it's delivered.
I also like how in this scene everybody reacts the way that you think they're gonna react. So like Hu Yang is worried about the head exploding, and Sabine's like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And Ahsoka is like, I trust that nothing bad will happen because, nothing ever, she can take care of herself.
I'm aware I'm the main character.
Right. And then Hera is just like, well, I'm a hologram, so I don't give a fuck. Like, so I just love I love the energy of every single character in this episode. Or in this scene. This is so fucking funny.
I also just noticed this, and I think it's cool. This is easily one of the best scenes in the show. 3 of the 4 participants in this scene are women,
Oh wow, yeah.
which I think is cool.
I don't
Just
think we've ever had more than 3 women characters
in
on
a single
screen
scene.
ever. Like
and
ever.
not in terms of like characters that have speaking lines
Right.
who are important to the scene and who are not like droids.
Also, the fact that it's essentially the top 3 build female characters are also in this, like in one
That is
scene
true.
together.
Yes.
Because I feel like a lot of shows they commit the cardinal sin of like, oh, we have all these female characters, but none of them ever talk to each other, or that none of them are
Correct.
ever in the same scene together. And so this does that, where you're like, oh, here they all are in the, well, I mean, Hera's not physically there, but she's there.
She's there. She's
Right.
there in the scene.
She's talking. And so it's like, yeah, I don't think we've ever seen that ever.
And David Tennant's just happy to be here.
Right. Well,
David Tennant's
or
just
unhappy
thrilled
to
to
be
be here.
there.
Well, the character's unhappy.
Right. The character's unhappy to be there.
When he delivers the line, "Because you're a hologram" to Hera, I was like, oh, that's why this man won an Emmy for this part.
Yeah, chef's kiss. He is
Chef's kiss.
so good.
Watching a bunch of really good actors just bounce off each other in a scene that's tense, but it's funny, but there's character work going on here. It's really interesting because also, I do want to note, this is the first time in the show so far that Ahsoka has trusted Sabine to do something.
Right. Just based on just like, I know she can do this. Like,
Yes.
it's like, yeah.
This is the first time. In the preceding scene, she was asking for Sabine's opinion, but she was like, no, you can't take it off the ship. No, you can't do this, etc., etc. And at least from Sabine's point of view, this is the first time Ahsoka has really been like, yeah, go ahead. Actually, when Hu Yang goes to pull the plug, you can kind of see there's an acting choice that Rosario Dawson makes where one of her arms was slightly elevated and out. Like she was going to move to, it's not clear if she was going to move to pull the plug herself or if she was going to move to stop Hu Yang from pulling the plug.
Okay.
But she kind of has her arm out a little bit. Go back and watch the scene if you haven't already, because it's a little difficult to describe. It's out a little bit, and then she moves it back down to a rest position. It's a really interesting, subtle acting choice.
Yeah, I'll take another look at it.
Anyway, we find out that the droid's from Corellia. Now, Bradley, do you recall the planet Corellia?
I think it may have been slightly mentioned in a movie here or there. I don't know if it's like that important.
Yeah, it's not super important to the characters. None of our main characters from anything are from there. We've never been, it's never been referenced, and there are not important ships that have been manufactured there. It is kind of a nothing planet that we have never cared about and never will care about. No, it's Corellia famously is the homeworld of Han Solo, and the Millennium Falcon was manufactured there. It appears visibly in Solo: A Star Wars Story, and it has appeared across Star Wars media for decades. This goes all the way back to Legends. It was a big planet in Legends. It's a big planet in canon. It's basically a super big deal that's shown up even as late as recently in the High Republic. Daniel Jose Older's Midnight Horizon takes place primarily on Corellia. A short story by Alyssa Wong takes place on Corellia, and a one-shot comic that's coming out soon. And my character on For Light and Dice is from Corellia.
Oh, wow.
So, big planet in Star Wars. We're going there. I do want to talk about Hera's mom conversation she has with Sabine.
Okay.
I liked it a lot. That is my comment on that.
Okay.
No, I think it's interesting how when you look at a character who is a mentor figure, we think of them as kind of the mentor says words and the mentee just listens. And what I think Hera does so interestingly as a character, because she relates to people in different ways. When she's talking to Sabine, she's talking as someone who's in a position not of authority, but as somebody that Sabine respects. Somebody that Sabine looks up to. When she talks to Ahsoka, she'll talk to Ahsoka later in the episode. She talks to Ahsoka more as an equal. Somebody who's on her level, so she has to guide Ahsoka a different way than she guides Sabine, but she's guiding both of these characters really effectively to where they emotionally need to go. And I think that's really good, versatile writing of this character as this mentor figure, directly to Sabine and sort of indirectly to Ahsoka, which I think it's cool. I think Hera is one of the best Star Wars characters.
Yeah, she really is the mom of Star Wars. Like, I mean, there's mothers
She's
in
the
Star Wars,
mom
but
of
she's like the mom. Yeah.
She's the mom of
Right.
Star Wars.
Section 3. On Cetos, Morgan arrives to the ruin. She manipulates the star map by using a green flame. The map projects a path between two galaxies, and Morgan informs them that that's where Thrawn is. Morgan leaves to prepare for the arrival of her ship, and Balin sends Shin to Corellia and assist Merrick with the final transport.
So apparently there are other galaxies
Well,
that you can travel to.
Is this
This
the first
is the
mention?
first, I think this is the first reference to the fact that there's like other
other
galaxies
places.
that you could just sort of travel to. So obviously the big one in Legends was where the Yuzan Vong were from. The entire Yuzan Vong War was their invaders from another galaxy. We do not have the time to get into all the implications of that.
Sure.
But so I remember a lot of when like, oh, there's another galaxy started floating around. The Yuzan Vong theory started popping up again, and I'm like, please shut up. That's never going to happen. But I couldn't find it offhand, but I do vaguely remember Dave Filoni basically saying, yeah, no, there's nothing saying there's not other galaxies. Like, this is not just the one galaxy.
Well, yeah, because then it would be kind of fucking stupid. Because then it's like, oh, this is the only galaxy that exists. Then there's everything else outside of that is just black space, like nothing. Like makes no sense whatsoever. Like it's just not how our universe works. It's not how a fake universe works. So I just like I don't know. I like that he's keeping it consistent with semi-real, rules.
Well, what I also like is now too that this opens up new avenues of Star Wars storytelling because
Sure.
we don't necessarily have to have a story that's set in the galaxy far, far away specifically to be a story that can be set in the Star Wars universe. Now, as long as they keep it sort of mythological and vague, I think that's the way that they need to handle it. But now the storytelling is open to, yeah, you can jump to another galaxy if you want to.
Right.
There's all sorts of stuff that you don't know.
My only rule with that, and they're gonna have to follow this rule because they do it in this show and they do a good job of it to a point. They have to be very limited in the certain species that are going to be in these other galaxies. I do not want to see, Rhodians in another galaxy. I don't want to see, any I don't want to see Jawas randomly in like a random ass galaxy. Like it doesn't make sense. Like if you're gonna do it like right, they need to do like no, totally new creatures, totally new species, like all that stuff. It needs to all be different if you're gonna do a different galaxy. I don't mind doing it here. Like if we're staying in the far, far away galaxy, we can, you can have as many fucking Jawas and Rhodians as you want. Like, that's why the universe or the galaxy feels so small sometimes in all the Star Wars media is because you're like, oh, everybody has an R2D2 droid. Everybody has a fucking, everybody knows what Jawas are. Everybody knows what Womp Rats are. Like, stuff like that. Because there's only so much they can know about their own galaxy. So I would love to see them do new stories in new galaxies with new characters and just be like, okay, it's still a Star War. It's just in a different galaxy. And actually, hilariously enough, I want to see them say in a far away galaxy, at a different far away galaxy, far, far, far away, or something.
Anyway, wonderful news about that line, but we're not to that episode yet. No, I agree. I think that what this does really effectively is it sets up that opportunity for new storytelling, and there is a concerted effort. I feel like not so much in these Disney Plus shows, but in some other pieces of media and some other like visual media and things to have different aliens, different droids. This is something bizarrely the sequels did really well, especially Force Awakens. Was it like we're not just going to have, Mon Cal in the background. We're not just going to have Quarians in the background. I just said Quarians instead of Quarren. Fuck me. If they put a Quarian in the background, that'd be really fucking funny. No, they said we're going to have these different types of aliens and things. And so I think there's a lot of good opportunities here for that. Different aliens, different droids, different types of storytelling, different power structures and dynamics. As long as they keep to the core essence of, what Star Wars is, then there's wonderful new avenues for storytelling that have come up. I believe this might be the first time that we're ever seeing Night Sister magic in live action.
I believe so. I want to double check the Wikipedia. I think it is. I don't think we've ever seen it. I don't think has it even been mentioned? I mean,
not in
live action though, right?
Not in live action anywhere.
I'm gonna say confidently that this is the first time we've ever seen Night Sister magic and or mentioned it live action, really.
I'm also confident in saying this is the first time we've ever seen it in live action. Of course, it's all over the animated shows.
Well, yeah.
But in live action, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've seen someone use Night Sister magic in live action. And it looks cool as fuck.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, in the back of my brain, I was like, Morgan, why did you not use magic when you were fighting Ahsoka?
So I have a theory about this.
Oh, okay.
And my theory is Dave Filoni didn't know she was a Night Sister at the time.
Well, that would probably be why. Or maybe she was just trying to be more subtle so that, she wasn't giving away who she was. Maybe there's reasons why she just didn't do it,
I mean, it's entirely possible. It's mostly, I think, just because of the plot.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, but
it's so the plot of the Ahsoka episode of Mandalorian could happen.
yeah, probably.
Morgan opens up this sort of star thing. You know what? Fine. Let's just get this out of the way. Let's just do this. All right. I'm gonna call it the star map. I know
Okay.
it's not what they call it in the show,
That's just what I call it in my
but
description
it's
too, because I
it's
was like,
very obviously, super obviously, a reference to the star maps from Knights of the Old Republic.
oh,
Like, if you Google Star Map KOTOR, do this right
okay.
now,
I'm
actually.
doing it right
Google
now. Yeah.
Star Map KOTOR and go to images, and you tell me if that looks familiar.
Yeah, I mean it's essentially the exact same.
It's the same fucking thing.
Like there's
This
not
is
really much of a
very
difference.
obviously a reference to KOTOR. So they have a star map. That's cool. Look, I'm controversial in that I think KOTOR needs to stay the way it is. I was hesitant about the remake, and I anytime it's been brought up outside of its specific game, I've been like, don't really like what they're doing with you. Like, I was not a fan of the Revan novel. I have complicated feelings on the Old Republic video game. The original game itself is a fucking masterpiece. And it's got some crow's feet because it's 20 years old. But I do genuinely think part of the reason so many people talk about this game is because everybody played it.
Right.
And everybody has positive memories of playing this game, especially if you're like my age, if you're in your 30s. You have positive memories of playing this game if you were a Star Wars fan that was big into gaming around this time. So I do think like it's worth playing. Like, and not in the sense of like, oh, it's if you liked Baldur's Gate 3 and you want to see where that kind of started, that whole sort of multi-branching path storytelling. They use different like combat systems because Baldur's Gate 3 is just using D&D. But KOTOR being this big sort of like multi-choice, like open-ended, well, it's not really open-ended because there's only really 2 endings, but it's good. It's a good game. This has been a tangent about how you should play Knights of the Old Republic because at least once, because it's a good game. And anyway, the point is I like seeing references to it.
Gotcha.
Speaking of things we're having references to, the planet of Peridia has literally never appeared in anything before this or been mentioned in anything before this. It's totally new.
It's just a new thing.
It's just a new thing. We do see the Purgil around the, like, ringing the pathway that leads to
Right.
Peridia, which I thought was a nice touch and a nice clue as to like why the Purgil actually go there, or how they found Peridia in the first place, or rather how they found the galaxy in the first place.
Right.
However, I will say, keep in mind, there's always some truth to legends. So if you hear a legend in Star Wars, there's probably some truth in there to it.
Right.
Just saying. I also find it interesting, the relationship between Balin and Morgan when they talk in this scene. Balin's Skull is much more of a realist, which is interesting for a former Jedi. He more believes in what he can see, what he can touch, what he can verify. Morgan just has a great deal of faith in her own abilities and in the voices she's apparently hearing inside her head.
You know, I didn't hear it the first time I watched it, but when I rewatched the episode, you can very clearly hear like whispering, and I don't know what it's saying. I think it's saying like "come to us" or something like that.
Yeah, it's
And she's
something like that.
she like sits there and she like closes her eyes, and you can hear her listening to it. And I don't think the other characters can hear it. I feel like Wikipedia fucked up and they said that all the characters can hear the whispering. I don't think so. I think only Morgan can hear it, but
I do think only Morgan is able to hear it.
but
Based on some dialogue
yeah.
later on, I think only Morgan is able to hear
Right,
it.
she's the only one getting these quote unquote messages from whatever the Force, we'll call it. But yeah, it's interesting.
Well, we know what it is, but not
Well,
at this point.
not at this time we know what it is.
She thinks it's Thrawn.
Right, which is also interesting because it's like, why does she think it's Thrawn talking? I don't know. I just kind of interesting. Unless, well, maybe we'll get there when we get there. Talking about what the actual voices are, and
What are
maybe
the voices?
they are helping Thrawn talk to her somehow. But I don't know.
I think
like,
that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, we get our first mention of the Eye of Sion.
Right. I did
Which
kind
is
of
a
fuck
ship
up a
that's going
little bit. I said it was her ship. Technically, we don't know what it is right now. We don't really find out until I guess the very, very end what it is, but we know it's a ship.
It's a ship. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the name, the Eye of Sion.
Okay, what is that?
I
have to
went
do
on a
with me?
Wikipedia journey
Okay.
with this. So, shout out to Wikipedia. We use Wikipedia for basically every episode because it's just a repository of knowledge. The level of detail that has gone into Wikipedia is nothing short of incredible. I have been reading Wikipedia since I was 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. So, for a vast vast majority of my life, I have been using Wikipedia. It is an incredible and exhaustive resource. So shout out to the people over at Wikipedia. Also, they have been doing an initiative for the past couple of years to try to update their content to be more inclusive in both the wording and how the content is approached. And I think that is cool and rad of them. That there has been some controversy, but they are moving in a much more positive direction. And I think that is awesome and cool. So shout out to those guys. I cannot possibly state every time I have double checked something on Wikipedia, but just know I try to mention it at least once an episode, and I try to mention if I'm going to directly quote from it, in part because Wikipedia is the coolest thing. Learn to use Wikipedia, guys. It's a skill you have to acquire, but if you can acquire it, you will sound so smart about Star Wars on the internet.
Yes.
Because you will be able to just know what to plug into the Wikipedia search bar. Anyway, I went on a journey because I heard Eye of Sion. And like everyone who is a Legends fan, I immediately thought about Darth Sion, who is a character from Knights of the Old Republic 2. He's the character that's featured on the box. He is a very, very famous looking character. He's all gross. His face is fucked up. He's got one eye that is like completely opaque. So it looks like it's been, the original one was like ripped out of his head and there was a new one that was jammed in there. It's really messed up. It's really gory character design, but it's very famous character design for this character. And I thought this might be a reference to that. However, I went to Darth Sion's Wikipedia page because I was like, okay, if this is a reference to Darth Sion, what does Darth Sion actually mean? And I went to it and I discovered that this is probably not a reference to Darth Sion, or if it is, it's referencing what the character was originally named after. Because on the Wikipedia page, it says, quote, Leland Shee has stated that Sion's name comes from the word Scion, S-C-I-O-N, meaning heir.
Like H-E-I-R?
H-E-I-R. As an heir to the Empire.
Oh,
so
okay.
Eye of Sion, the ship, is probably a reference to the character whose name comes from the word meaning heir. So Eye of the Heir.
That makes a lot of sense.
As in Eye of the Heir to the Empire. That was my journey in Wikipedia behind the scenes sections.
That is, first of all, for those at home, that's for people who have nothing else to do in their life.
I have so much else to do with my life,
deep
Bradley.
Dive on Wikipedia to get all this information.
You have more free time than I do.
I know. I'm just kidding. I just find that really funny that you went down that dark rabbit hole just to find out that information.
Just to find out it probably is Eye of the Heir. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of Wikipedia, we get our first mention of Maruk's name, and you've talked about this before, but I do want to quote from Wikipedia again in the behind-the-scenes section for the article on Maruk. Quote, in Arthurian legend, I guess it's Marok. I've been saying it wrong.
I say Merrick.
Merrick?
That's how I say it. Like with an E sound. Like, I don't know why. That's just more comfortable for me to say. You could literally say it a million ways, guys. It doesn't really matter, honestly.
Quote, in Arthurian legend, Maruk is the name of a knight who was turned into a werewolf by his wife, who had learned these skills from the witch Morgan Le Fay. In Ahsoka, Morgan is the name of Maruk's employer, one of the witches of Dathomir. The wolf motif also ties in with Maruk's fellow Darkside users Shin Hati and Balin Skull, who share their last names with the two wolves from Norse mythology. End quote. I feel like there is a crucial piece of information missing here, and that is that just Dave Filoni likes wolves.
Yeah, I feel like
he's named after a werewolf because Dave Filoni likes wolves.
I feel like people miss that fact all the time, especially now. I am guilty of this, and other people were too when this show was coming out, that we thought that Merrick was super fucking important because of all these name connections and Shin and Hadi, all that stuff. Like, people were like, oh my God, this is like the most important naming convention ever. All these wolf references. And I'm like, now looking back on it, it's Dave Filoni likes wolves. It's
Dave
the reason.
Filoni likes wolves.
There's literally no other reason. It's just he likes wolves. I love that people came up with connections that mean something, but like he likes werewolves and wolves.
He likes wolves. No, I think it's interesting that, you know, in retrospect, this is a character who was basically gained his powers from a witch, indirectly from a witch named Morgan, and now we know. We know that probably meant something, but we don't have time to get into that. That'll be next episode.
I was gonna say that's next week's episode. We'll talk more
Actually, we
about it.
will fucking get into that later in scene in this episode. But my final note for this section is I had originally thought when these episodes aired, not to bring up Legends again, but I had thought that Baylan Skoll might be the Sabaoth of Dave Filoni's Heir to the Empire. Like, I thought that was where this was going when he was giving his speech about power. I don't really think so anymore. I think that was something of a misdirect. It seems like it's the Witches of Dathomir this time around, playing that same role, kind of, that Sabaoth played in the original novels. None of these words mean anything to Bradley, but to our Legends fans, all of those words did mean something. So I'm just going to super promise that if you've read Heir to the Empire in that trilogy, those words mean... I mean, he kind of is playing that role because he's kind of doing... We don't have time to get into that.
Section 4. On Corellia, Ahsoka and Hera visit the shipyards where Regional Supervisor Weaver gives them a tour, revealing that they retain former Imperial staff for operational reasons. Hera suggests Tano consider taking Ren on as her apprentice, and meanwhile on Lothal, Sabine has healed from her lightsaber wound. Huyang, noticing Ren's modified lightsaber, encourages her to resume training despite Tano's reservation.
The Phantom is here.
I thought it was so cute. Yeah, I mean, I know why they didn't use the ghost for like just plot reasons, because it's just a big set piece essentially. Like it's like
it's a big well, it's a big cargo like hauler.
Right.
The ghost is a cargo hauler. This is a smaller shuttle.
It makes sense, like from obviously a plot standpoint, but I kind of wanted to see the ghost, obviously. But I love that we at least got the
wonderful news for you later about this series, Bradley. We also see very briefly in the astromech port of the Phantom, we do get our first look at the best character in the show, Chopper.
Ah, yes. The
Chopper
MVP
is
of this
here.
episode.
The MVP of this episode, the MVP of this show, the MVP generally of Star Wars. All right, so we do have a new actor in this scene.
Yes, we do.
Bradley, you want to talk about who's playing Regional Supervisor Min Weaver?
Yes, he is played by Peter Jacobson. He is most known for the show House. He was on the show Ray Donovan, and then he was on the show The Americans.
Yeah, he's a TV that guy. 2000s TV watchers you'll know him as Dr. Chris Taub on House. Like, that's where I recognized him from. I was like, oh, it's Dr. Taub from House. But he's also been in like Law and Order, and he just randomly pops up in episodes of things. He's just a TV that guy.
And I'm not going to mention the director right now, but she did direct she's only directed 2 episodes of The Americans, and it was the same 2 episodes that he appeared in. So I just thought that was an interesting little fact that he's shown up in stuff that she's done before.
Yeah, he's been acting since 1993,
which is when I was born.
I wasn't gonna say that. I wasn't gonna out your twink death live on the air, but
it's a new year, it's a new me, so I guess why not?
Yeah, you've regenerated into a new form,
right,
of homosexual. Apparently, the one you picked was podcaster.
I know, unfortunately.
I like the underlying story element of the pieces of the Empire being repurposed into the New Republic, and also how that's sort of emblematic of elements of the New Republic just having to be the Empire again, purely for the sake of the Empire's bureaucracy worked really well on a ground level just to keep things organized. And I think it's interesting that this has been a common theme through The Mandalorian, and it has now been a theme in Ahsoka, that when you transfer that stuff over without making substantive changes to it, not a whole lot changes at the ground level. And also you open yourself up for exactly those same systems to be exploited by fascists to retake power. And we do see that happen to an extent. So I thought that was an interesting choice to have here. I also thought the commentary on capitalism was not something I expected in Ahsoka. The indifference of capitalism towards authoritarianism, and how capitalism is only concerned with profit and investor profit and market stability, and doesn't really care about any sort of morality or ethics. It is only concerned with, can the engine keep running? Wasn't expecting that. But here we are
I also
in this
loved
show.
the commentary of or not even commentary, just like in universe plot of Hera not realizing that this was a thing. Just like she's clearly very high up in, the New Republic. She's a general, and she doesn't know that ex-Imperial people just continued about their day and or just have it like day jobs like that they just kept like no one was like, you know what, maybe we should look into everybody that was a loyalist, like let's just double check on them, like it's fine, like we're just checking, like no harm no foul. But like she's very blatantly like, wait, that we still employ them, like that seems like an odd choice. How do you know they're going to stay loyal to us? And he's just like, money, they're fine, they don't care.
Well, Hera, you got to keep in mind too that Hera was very high up in the rebellion, but the rebellion having to transition to the New Republic government has not been a smooth transition.
Right.
In a lot of ways, you have this small group of rebels who came together to defeat the Empire and now have to turn around and make the whole machine work by not disrupting it too much, but disrupting it enough that you're getting rid of the vestiges of the Empire. And it's tricky. And the only person who really seems to have a grasp on how to do that or have an understanding of what that actually means is Mon Mothma, because she worked for the Republic government, the Imperial government, and now the New Republic government. Everybody else is just kind of like, wait, we're still employing these people? And also because they're insulated just by virtue of how busy they are. Hera's high up in the New Republic, but she's high up in the New Republic military. She's constantly off on Home One doing military things. Shouldn't understand, like, how local planetary government had to deal with the fall of the Empire. Like, it's a complicated series of situations, and I like how it's adding a little more nuance to this era that in Legends didn't have a lot of nuance. They basically put the Republic government back in place and nothing changed.
Which is not
And
realistic. I mean,
which
it's
is
not like, yeah.
Well, you can certainly do that. It doesn't go well, is the thing.
Right.
It inevitably slides back. And it sort of felt like, to an extent, this was where Legends was sort of going, because the Empire does come back hundreds of years later and is in control of the galaxy. And then, like, in Fate of the Jedi, they had put a former Imperial officer as New Republic Chief of State. Like, Natasi Dalla was Chief of State for a while. Now, she was bad at it and had to be defeated, but that was a thing that they looked at and were like, yeah, this is fine. So I don't know, maybe Legends would have eventually gone here. Certainly some of the politics of it was changing, but I thought this was an interesting series of tiny commentaries on capitalism and rebuilding.
And I thought too it was the opposite of what they showed us in like Mando 3, which was in the Dr. Pershing episode where he was like, well, why don't we utilize these Empire assets, like that, these chips and these ships and these things, that they're like, nah, just fucking like destroy them and wipe it and start over. Like, you know.
Well, in Mando 3, it's interesting because they want to destroy what they can't repurpose. We literally see in that episode the device that scrambles his brain was an Imperial device that the New Republic, literally a fucking torture device, that the New Republic found a use for, and so they used it. All they're preaching all episode about how, well, we can't use the Imperial stuff.
Right.
We just can't use that. Unless, we have some value in it. Unless we can use it for our own purposes. And then, no, that's fine. No, that's perfectly okay. Don't worry about it at all. It's the hypocrisy of the New Republic government to say this. And we're seeing it again here with much more of a commentary on capitalism and how this shipyard is operating. Anyway, so Ahsoka has a line where she's like talking about training, and she's like, well, when you're ready, and so do they. And I'm like, you are so full of shit.
She made me so mad in this.
Did you forget, Ahsoka Tano? Did you forget your literal introduction in the Clone Wars movie and how Anakin was not at all ready to take a Padawan and got one anyway and had to learn to do your master, who you clearly hold in great esteem? Did you forget this, Ahsoka Tano? Because you're full of shit right now. I know Dave Filoni didn't forget. I think this is an intentional writing choice. But Ahsoka Tano, did you fucking forget how your master reacted when they were like, it's time for Anakin to take a Padawan? And he's like, fuck off.
You're like, yeah, I'm not even a master. Like, how can I be take on a fucking apprentice right now? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like,
Well, and also he's like, I'm just not interested in this whatsoever. And then, like, this man went to bat against the entire Jedi Order for you, Ahsoka. Like, she makes me irritated in this scene.
well, it's also like the cycle of
In a good
abuse
way.
from like, Jedi teaching of like, oh, well, you're only ready when I say you're ready kind of thing. Like,
Right.
there's
That
no
is a
like
good point.
loopholes. Like,
That is a good point. She's had to learn how to make decisions for herself, and she's come into this. She's almost kind of overcorrected to an extent. Like, the Jedi were very dogmatic in terms of, we saw this in Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, where they're like, no, we'll decide what you're gonna do and when you're ready to do it. And then she spent a whole bunch of time having to make her own choices, and now she doesn't like anybody telling her, like, well, maybe you should take this Padawan. It'll be good for you. Even though, you maybe aren't ready, or you feel like you aren't ready. I don't know. It's an interesting sequence.
so I like the flip side of that when they show Hu Yang and Sabine with
God,
that
I love
conversation.
this
Yeah,
scene. I love this scene. This is so well acted, despite the fact that one of them is a droid. There's
yeah,
so
that's
many interesting lines going on. I do like originally in the scene how they're like, well, they basically debunk the whole idea that she's carrying Ezra's lightsaber around.
right, because he says that she modified it to the point where it's not really his lightsaber anymore.
It's hers. And it's like, shut up, weird nerds on the internet who are going to say, it's not really her lightsaber. It was Ezra's. She's just using it. She's modified it. She's trained with it. It's her lightsaber.
Right. And honestly, to be fair, I don't even think of season 2 and 3 and 4 as Ezra's lightsaber. I always think of the season 1 lightsaber as Ezra's lightsaber, where he's got the little gun attachment or like whatever, that little like stun gun thing that he adds to his lightsaber. That's what I think of when I think of Ezra's lightsaber. So when I saw this, I was like, is it? I'm like, is it his lightsaber? Because I don't think of that as his lightsaber at all. I'm like, that's definitely her lightsaber. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, and it's going back to this idea that, like, it's almost kind of a refutation of the idea that a lightsaber is sort of bound. We have a term. I used to play World of Warcraft a lot, and I'm probably going to end up getting back into it when the new expansion comes out. But there's a term for something to be what's called soulbound, and it's basically the idea, it's an item that cannot be transferred. So you get a weapon in a raid, you get a drop from whatever boss, and you can have what's called bind on equip, where you can trade the item around, and whoever equips it first, that's who gets to keep the item. Or you can have something that's soulbound that you pick up and no one else can use it ever again. And it's kind of a refutation of this idea that a lightsaber is something that becomes so bonded to the wielder that you're incapable. Because we see multiple times throughout Star Wars people using other people's lightsabers. Luke Skywalker uses Anakin's lightsaber.
General
Rey,
Grievous has entered the chat.
well, General Grievous is complicated, but like Rey,
But
Rey
yeah,
uses
yeah,
carries the
the
Anakin's
Skywalker
lightsaber,
saber.
the Skywalker saber, for the entirety of the sequels before she builds her own.
Right.
Luke gets his own before eventually gets his own after he loses the Skywalker saber. Literally, Cal Kestis's lightsaber it's half and half both of his masters. Half of it is Jaro Tapal's, half of it is Sir Junta's. So like it's
It's different.
interesting, the idea that lightsabers are not something that like you can just casually toss around. Like, you form a bond to it over time, but it's not a bond that can't be remade somewhere else, which I think was interesting with this
Right,
scene.
because didn't even in the movies, doesn't like Obi-Wan talk about the fact that Anakin has had to remake his lightsaber multiple times because he constantly loses it and he constantly has to get a new one.
I don't know if they've said that he. Ooh, I would have to double check.
I'm pretty sure
I would
that's
have
a
to
plot
go.
point.
I would have to go watch Attack of the Clones,
It's
though.
I feel like it's a passing line in there where he says like something like you always lose your lightsaber, you always have to get another one. Like so I don't know if it's like maybe I'm like over analyzing one tiny little line of dialogue, but I feel
Uh,
like he has had to replace his lightsaber multiple times.
we know he's lost it multiple times. I don't know if he's found it multiple times. There is an episode of the Clone Wars about Ahsoka losing her lightsaber and having to go on an adventure with Tara Sinube to go and find it. That might be what you're thinking of. There might be a reference to Anakin has lost his lightsaber a bunch of times.
Yeah, maybe in that episode or something.
I need to double check.
Okay.
I'm doing that right now.
Okay.
Okay, so according to Wikipedia, the origin of the Skywalker saber was actually after Attack of the Clones, because the one he's using in Attack of the Clones gets destroyed
Right.
during the droid factory thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
because he has it in his hand and then his hand gets clamped down on or whatever, and then when it comes back up, it's like sparking because it doesn't work anymore.
right, I'm not sure how many lightsabers he had prior to that. That's something that's going to require a lot more research, and we don't have time for that.
Sure.
We get our first indication that Ahsoka was the one who quit the training, not Sabine,
Ooh, okay.
which was interesting. Every time we get a little more detail about what happened, and again, like I said last episode, knowing what happened, like now, looking back, it's super interesting, but this was our first indication. And that has also led to Sabine feeling inadequate. And that really is the root of Sabine's problem in these first two episodes, is she feels inadequate. She feels like she doesn't deserve the training because Ahsoka looked at her and was like, you're not good enough, at least in terms of what Sabine thinks. And this conversation she has with Hu Yang, where he just drops some incredible lines like, you have never indicated that you wanted to come back, and the only time you are wasting is your own. It was like, girl, if you just ask to come back,
Right.
Ahsoka will let you.
Yeah, because it's like they both don't want to be the one to call the other one first, right? It's like that's the kind of mentality that they're trying to show us is that like they're
Right.
both being stubborn, they're both being like annoying about it. And it's because they both are so like not insecure in themselves, but I mean, well, I guess technically, yes. I
Both
mean,
of them are. Both of them have
yeah,
a degree of insecurity in themselves. Ahsoka
right,
as a master and Sabine as a Padawan,
right.
and that's really what the fatal flaw of this initial master Padawan relationship was. It's that they were both insecure in those roles. I wish we could have seen that in some form
Again,
rather than simply learning about it after
I'm
the
thinking
fact. But
Sabine
here
Tales
we
of the
are.
Jedi episode. I'm just saying, throw it out there.
Please do. Anyway, this scene is fucking amazing. It's fantastic. Anytime that they just have characters having a conversation, it's really good. And anytime they're trying to forward the plot, I'm like, mm.
Section 5. At the shipyard, Hera questions the production of a classified starship, and when authorization is requested, a protocol droid recalls encountering an HK droid. Some of the command crew try to attack the pair, but are subdued. As Ahsoka is headed after the departing ship, she is confronted by the Inquisitor Merrick. They fight. Meanwhile, Hera heads after the ship that is escaping, and it begins firing on her, and Chopper manages to attach a homing beacon to the runaway transport just before it jumps into hyperspace.
So we can't go through this scene. We can't possibly talk about every single actor who's showing up in this scene, but there is one that I want to shout out because she's cool. Bradley, please tell us who is voicing C1D1, the protocol droid who identifies the HK units.
We have said this name before. She is voiced by Shelby Young.
Where have we seen Shelby Young before, Bradley?
Literally every piece of Star Wars media that I could possibly think of. Mostly, I mean, literally, I only wrote down two because I was just like, well, I mean, she's in everything. She does voices in the Bad Batch. Most recently, she has done voices in Young Jedi Adventures. So I thought that was worth noting.
Yes, she is a big additional voices actor. A lot of her credits are additional voices, which, according to people who are voice actors, is that's the big bucks.
Yeah, that's
Is
where
if
you
you
want
can
to
get
go.
into
Yeah.
being additional voices, because then you just come in and read a bunch of different voice lines.
The
Uh,
dream.
as far as Star Wars goes, correctly, she's been in Young Jedi Adventures. She's done some voice work for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. She's Captain Bragg in Star Wars The Bad Batch. She's the voice of Princess Leia Organa in basically all the Lego Star Wars stuff. My favorite anecdote about her is that if you listen closely to the voice lines she does in the Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga version of A New Hope, she imitates Carrie Fisher when Carrie Fisher's doing a British accent and when she's doing an American accent. Because Carrie Fisher changes from a British accent to an American accent throughout the film. And actually, Shelby Young imitated that, which I thought was neat. So she's cool. We like her. So we get that it's a hyperdrive core from an SSD, so from a Super Star Destroyer, which is interesting that they require that much power.
Right. And Hera's like super fucking suspicious. She's like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
We're not building anything that big. The New
She's like,
Republic doesn't build fucking super weapons.
well, what I love is that she's like, I'm literally a fucking general. Like, I know what the fuck is going on. Like, and we're not building anything with nearly that much firepower, that nearly that much like juice. Like, so what are you building? And then he's just like, classified.
No, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is so Hera Syndulla in this scene. Well, I'm unclassifying it.
Right. Yeah. She's like,
I
that's
don't know if
literally
you have
my
the
one
clearance.
ability.
You want to bet?
Right. And I love that like only the human element can keep her at bay. Like, whereas when she talks to like C1 or whatever, the droid's like immediately like, oh yeah, you have clearance. Like, so here you go. Like, like
I saw the HK droid preventing me from doing my job.
right.
And Minwei was like, God fucking damn it.
He's like, shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up. No, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the standout of this episode and this scene in particular.
Yeah, yeah.
Just in terms of just being Hera Syndulla, like her presence in the Heir to the Empire movie and future like stories in the Mandoverse is one of the most exciting things to me, just because she's so fucking good in this part. Anyway, the ship takes off. There's dual things that are happening. What I want to know is why the direction of this episode and the script of this episode gives Maruk so much fucking weight. Because he gets like this epic entrance. Yeah. He gets this big fight with Ahsoka. He gets a point where he activates his second blade, Darth Maul style. And I'm like, you've triggered everything in our Star Wars brains to go, this character is important. This fight will mean something. Yes. And then it fucking doesn't. It goes nowhere. It means nothing. And it purely existed to distract Ahsoka from... It's the lightsaber duel, even though the fight choreography is fantastic. And to be clear, the fight choreography is fucking amazing. The stunt performers in this scene are fucking amazing. The direction is great. This is my least favorite type of lightsaber duel in Star Wars media because it means nothing. It challenges none of the characters in a particular way, and nobody learns anything from it, and we learn nothing as the audience from it. In fact, we learn information that turns out to be useless.
Yeah, because okay, like you said, every key thing that happens or that Merrick does in this scene is like it signifies something, because like there's even a point where when he activates the double lightsaber and he throws it like they always do in the cartoon or whatever, which was,
oh yes, I did love that.
Kiss. I love seeing that. When he boomerangs the lightsaber, he runs away. And then you can hear it in the audio. He uses the force. You can hear the force noise. It's like a pull noise. And he uses it to pull back his lightsaber. And that doesn't make sense to me. What if you figure out information later on? Like, how the fuck is this possible? Like, I don't understand the rules of Merrick's character later on, because I'm trying not to like say the thing I want to say about him because we're not there yet.
We'll get there. We'll fucking get there.
But this whole scene made you think that he's this formidable force user person that Tano's like, oh great, I got to deal with another fucking Inquisitor. Like, that's what's so interesting about this character, and I don't understand what the choice was.
And spoilers for the next few episodes, it goes nowhere and means nothing.
That's what I don't understand, the choice. I need to understand Filoni's choice here with this character.
Yeah, like the best Star Wars duels and the best antagonists are characters who can challenge our protagonists in some way and make them understand something about themselves. And this is just a duel that looks cool. Like, that's all that's going on in this scene.
Right.
And I'm like, Dave, you made the best lightsaber duel in all of Star Wars, which was Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Maul in season 3 of Rebels, and it lasted for 6 seconds. You made the best one. What is this? Like, anyway, this scene is punctuated by the most amazing thing.
Right.
Which is Hera and Chopper pursuing this transport. Everything Chopper does in this scene is fucking fantastic.
Everything he does.
And also, I want to point out that if you listen to what Chopper says, he does not encourage dropping the thing on the city. He just asks if it's bad to drop it down into the port. That's all he asks. He does not encourage this. No, Chopper is fucking amazing. The scene where he's like, did you go through my stuff?
Right. And literally when he said that, it's all you can hear it. It's like and you're just like, he
No, I didn't
said,
go through your stuff.
yeah, and you just know what she's gonna say. Like you know her answer to the question because you understood what he said. And I'm just like the dialogue between, first of all, props to Mary Elizabeth Winstead to do this scene, to talk to Chopper in this scene. Because obviously when she's filming in real life, there's no Chopper she's talking to, and they're probably not reacting with his dialogue either. I feel like she's just on her own, just saying her lines, and somehow she's able to capture this performance, and it's so good.
That's called professional good acting.
It's amazing.
It's fucking incredible. I laugh because so there's a bit of a running joke in my relationship is that my partner, when he loses something, he will spend however many minutes racing around the house, frantically throwing things around, trying to find it, and then I'll often find it in about 2 seconds. He'll be like, I can't find the this and such, and I'll walk in and be like, it was on the table.
Did you check underneath the
The zenith of this, the
Right.
zenith of this is I went to visit his family for Christmas, and there was a point they were looking for something for the car, and he and two other members of his family probably spent 15-20 minutes looking for something. And then I just retraced their steps
Right.
prior to going out to do the car, and I was like, it's been sitting right on the banister the whole time, like right out there. So I felt this scene deeply in my soul. I also do want to point out the two small moments that I thought were really cool. One was Ahsoka's sick little lean when she kind of leans to the side and the lightsaber whips past her.
Oh my God. Yeah, yeah. When
That
he
was
he
sexy.
throws the lightsaber at her and she just kind of barely moves out of the way. Like it's so close, but it's like, whoa, dude. Like,
It has the same energy of Luke brushing himself off after getting bombarded by First Order fire in The
yes.
Last Jedi.
Yeah, he's like,
The did you really think this was going to be a problem for me?
right. So good. I mean, I know that like on one hand it's just Ahsoka being cool, and on the other hand, I'm sure it's also practicality with her costume as well. Like she can't necessarily do so many like super crazy flips and backflips and things all the time because it's going to be very hard to do like animation wise with just her body and just things and her like her Montrails. I just feel like that's like probably slightly part of it, but I also feel like nah, Ahsoka's just badass. Like she just moves out
She's
of
too
the
cool for that. You
way.
get to a point where you're too cool to
Yeah.
show off because everybody knows. Everybody knows. Speaking of people who are too cool to show off, Chopper's little fist bump when he gets the tracker on the ship,
Yeah.
he's like, ah,
God,
I'm like, this is the best character. This is the best character in Star Wars.
he really is.
Hands down, period. No question.
Section 6. Back at home, Sabine lays out her Mandalorian armor and cuts her hair ceremoniously. On Corellia, Hera and the New Republic arrest the Empire loyalists, and Ahsoka heads back to her ship to get a call from Sabine, who is now ready. While in Lothal, Sabine admires the mural that she painted in Rebels, and Ahsoka meets her, and the group departs into space.
So, don't want to talk too much about the Sabine cuts her hair scene, just because I have really only two notes to it. One is that it very much echoes Kanan, a
Yep.
scene that Kanan does.
When she shaves his head, right? Or he cuts his hair.
He cuts
Same
his
braid or whatever off.
yeah, his thing off the back of his head. Yeah, it has some cultural significance, some symbolic significance. I'm not familiar with it.
Right.
I am pre-plugging an episode that has not come out yet, but I know for a fact that when Darkside Divas reaches this episode, they will be able to explain it much better than I can because Steph absolutely kicks my ass when it comes to doing research for things.
Yeah.
So go listen to that episode in the future.
In the future, right?
If you're listening to this episode a year and a half from now, you
I'm
can
sure
go listen to that
yeah, I was
episode.
gonna
I'm
say,
sure they will explain
done
it
now, yeah.
really fucking well. But it echoes that original Kanan scene. And what it is my second note. It's symbolic of a new beginning. It's
Right.
symbolic of starting over. Hu Yang says in the early scene, perhaps it is time to begin again. And really, what this episode is about for Sabine, specifically, it is about beginning again, trying again, starting again. That starting again is not necessarily a negative thing. I think too often we think about failure as the end. That the failure to do something is the ending of that story. Well, I tried and I failed, and that's the end of it. To start again almost requires more bravery and more strength than starting the first time. And what's really indicative about Sabine's character arc through these 2 episodes is her working up the courage to do that. To be, as you pointed out earlier in this episode, the one to make the call first. To pick up the phone and say, I would like to come back, which happens
Which she
slightly
does.
later in this scene.
Yeah, she FaceTimes her and she's like, I'm ready. Like,
I'm
let's do
ready.
this.
Let's go. I like the presence of the police gunships. Mostly because I just finished rebuilding my Lego set of this gunship,
Ah.
which is now sitting on my shelf next to my Lego Chancellor's office.
Do you have a I know this has nothing to do with anything, but do you have a Mon Cala minifig?
Oh, I have multiple.
Can you take the body of one of the New Republic police officers and put it on?
I don't think they've done New Republic police officer. I think they might have. They've done some Ahsoka Legos, but I haven't gotten them yet. But that was a diversion.
Sure.
And now we will return. Speaking of random aliens, there is a random Celestian here.
Interesting.
In the background. Again, I love that there's a lot of random aliens here.
Which is needed. And I'm glad that, not that Dave took the note that we had from Andor, but he just knows what to do sometimes.
Yeah, because Dave Filoni definitely does not listen to this show.
Right.
I mean, I wish he would. We are correct about many things. However, Dave Filoni does not listen to this show. If he did, he could not tell us. I do want to talk a little bit about the scene where Sabine calls Ahsoka. Okay. Because I do want to bring up my continuing complaint about the first few episodes of this show, is that Sabine has the clearer protagonist journey. She's had the refusal of the call, and now she has the accepting the call and embarking on the adventure arc in this episode, which, again, Ahsoka also has. But because of the way Ahsoka's written, that's not clear. And when it boils down to this scene and one of the two characters has to make a choice, Sabine's choice to be the one to reach out first is very clear. Ahsoka's choice to accept Sabine back is not as clear. It happens, it's there, but I think this is part of what contributes to people looking at Ahsoka, the character, and going, what the fuck was her arc even? What was that? It's so in the background and it's so eclipsed by Sabine having the exact same beats as co-protagonist that I don't want to say people missed it because it's not really there, but it's easy to miss. You have to sit there and really think about it. And because Sabine's is so obvious to see, I think that overshadows a lot Ahsoka's own journey, particularly in these first 2 episodes. I will take your silence as tacit agreement with everything I just said.
I mean, yeah.
Great. I love to be correct. Speaking of me being correct, this is pretty much the exact scene from Rebels when she goes to the mural. It also is one of the first scenes we saw from the show.
I love cool. This.
Notable exception, Ahsoka's clothing.
Yes. It's different, obviously.
Also the lighting. The lighting is way different in this scene.
I didn't like how people... I mean, I think we were guilty of this too when we were talking about the trailers. In episode 0, we said that, like, oh, maybe this is the same scene, just like we're just getting it in live action just as a flashback. And now that we know better, it's clearly just meant to mirror the scene. It's not it's not the exact same scene, guys. Like, relax. Like, it's just a mirroring of the scene.
Mythology, not a history. You know, we kind of have to let some things go. Now, that has come with the unfortunate caveat this week, for reasons I can't get into, of maybe don't expressly contradict things that other creators have done. Maybe if you have a minor character, maybe do a quick Wikipedia search of that character.
Just look.
To make sure that what you're writing makes sense as far as the 3 other appearances this character has ever had in a Star Wars. I'm not gonna get into like all of that because that's a whole conversation, but I'm just saying maybe that's the thing we do. But it is a mythology, not a history. Things aren't going to line up, and it takes nothing away from the scene for Ahsoka to be wearing different clothes or the context of the scene to have changed in a different story. In Rebels, it was an epilogue, a hopeful epilogue. In this story, it's a reaffirming of the character's purpose. Finally, Hu Yang mentions the Denab system. The Denab system was first identified in the Legends book, The Essential Atlas, authored by Jason Fry and Daniel Wallace. Side note, I've met Jason Fry. He's very cool. We don't really know, I think, any other planets in this system besides Cetos. In Legends, there wasn't really any that are identified. It's in the Sluice sector, which also contains such places as the Dagobah system, at least in Legends. That's what we know about the Denab system. A thing that was in there for me and no one else. And also, I keep looking down and being like, oh, I had another note about this sequence. Sabine is a Padawan again. The fact that Sabine was a Padawan with no apparent force powers was very controversial when these episodes came out.
Right, because like we know that in the history of what we know, that's never happened before, ever.
That, as far as we were aware, nothing
Right.
has ever happened before. And I think it speaks to an attitude amongst some Star Wars fans. And I'm not even saying this is necessarily an attitude that is exclusive to people who are toxic, because I think that there's people have gotten into sort of a mentality that there are certain rules to Star Wars that we just take as given that are nowhere established. And one of those is you have to be born with a talent for the Force to even be able to use it. That's one of the quote unquote rules that's never by any of the movies been established. It's never by any of the TV shows been necessarily established as a finite rule. But I think a lot of people looked at the fact that Sabine was a Padawan and went, what? Huh? Because to us, Padawan has a certain sort of meaning. And I'll admit it, I wasn't mad about this, but I was a little confused
Right.
what was going on. And of course, interviews from Dave Filoni eventually cleared it up.
Right.
That talent is only one factor. The Force flows through everyone, not just the special people.
This is true. And technically, Obi-Wan Kenobi says that in the very first movie, like flows through all of us.
It flows through all of us. It penetrates us and binds the galaxy together.
Exactly. Not sexually at all. And
that line has been taken the most out of context.
I love it.
It's crazy. I love it.
Section 7. In the final scene, we see the hyperdrive engine they were tracking being put into a gigantic large ship we learn is the Eye of Sion, with Morgan Elsbeth at the helm. Morgan FaceTimes with Balin, and she lets him know that nothing can stand in their way.
So that's very obviously a hyperspace ring.
Right, which I thought was so
very
cool.
Obviously is what's going on here.
Yeah, I was
right
like,
from the beginning we identified it.
When I saw that though, the first time, I was like, but where's the ship? Was my thought process. Now, not to boil future episodes, but there we find out where it is. I didn't make the connection. I was just thinking like, oh, it's just the ring is the ship. And I was like, oh, it's just a Jedi hyperspace ring thing. It's just a gigantic fucking one. And I was like, are they going to put this shit on a planet or something? I was like, what is the point of this?
Yeah, so I'm looking up something really quick. So you want to know what my first thought was when I saw this giant hyperspace ring thing?
What was your first thought?
We have got to do an episode on Outbound Flight.
You did do an episode, did you not?
We did. I actually checked this episode released on August 22nd, 2023. Our episode of Outbound Flight, with me and Colton discussing the novel, dropped on October the 2nd. So,
wow. So
5
right
weeks later, we covered Outbound Flight, which you can go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also recently, Outbound Flight has been released on audiobook. So you can actually listen to Outbound Flight.
This is true.
Yeah, my first thought was, okay, so there's multiple hyperdrives around a ring that's meant to traverse between galaxies, and Thrawn is involved in some form. This is fucking Outbound Flight. This is a very, very clear reference to Outbound Flight.
I like it.
Because the design of it is it's six ships ringing a central ship, and that's basically what this is. So go listen to our episode on Outbound Flight. It's very good. You can also go listen to the book. I do recommend reading the book before getting to that episode, because we do kind of have to spoil the ever-loving fuck out of the ending of that book in order to talk about it. But go listen to it. Finally, my final note for this episode is I love how complicated of a character Balin is. And I have a hot take about Balin. You want to hear my hot take about Balin's skull, Bradley?
I'm sure.
I do think they should recast this part. I think Ray Stevenson did an excellent job with the first season. He did an absolutely fantastic job. He laid a lot of groundwork with the character. He will be missed. His performance is incredible. I think they need to recast this part. I think this
I'm of
character is
yeah.
interesting enough that they really need to do more with this character.
I'm of two minds because, like, on the one hand, like, yes, I think absolutely, season two of Ahsoka, like, let's just continue the story where we were going with his character. Let's just keep fucking going and just recast it. My other brain says, no, he was so good. Let's just do it in comic book form, or let's do it in a book, or let's do it in Tales of the Jedi or something, and just make it a separate, totally different thing, just cartoon or something where it's technically him, but we'll just have him voiced by the same character. However, I don't love that idea as much as I like just recasting him.
Well, I also think too that we badly need to fucking get over this idea that a character in Star Wars has to be tied to the actor who played them originally.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Because you have plenty of characters who played by multiple actors over multiple pieces of media, written by multiple writers over multiple pieces of media. I think the characters are bigger than that. I think the stories are bigger than that. And I think too, if you look at a character like, a really legendary character like Macbeth. Let's talk about the character of Macbeth. Tens of thousands of people have done an interpretation on the character of Macbeth in the time that that character has existed, in the hundreds of years since that character existed. The character is always the same character. It's just the character is not necessarily defined by the actor who is playing him. And I think that the Star Wars characters, we can appreciate different actors playing different roles. And I don't think that we should necessarily lose a character just because we've lost the actor. The one exception is I'm fine with what they ended up doing with the reused Carrie Fisher footage in Rise of Skywalker. That's the one I'm sort of fine with because I'm like,
Right.
we'll let her close out this role. Other than that, in the future, whether an actor has to, for some reason be written off of a show for just random reasons, or, the tragic passing of an actor, or somebody gets busy, schedules don't line up, or something jumps media. I've been pretty supportive of, different actors taking on roles in animation versus live action. And I think that too, that this character, he's such an interesting character, and Rey has done such incredible work laying the foundations of who this man is, that I would like to see other actors take on this character and see what they can bring to it. And that's my hot take. I don't think we should necessarily be married to this idea that because to give another totally random example, because Mark Hamill played Luke Skywalker back in 1977, that Mark Hamill can be the only one to play Luke Skywalker, because there's other people that I think should be given a chance to inhabit the role of this legendary character.
Right. Yeah.
Like, for example, the people they fucking cast to be the body double in Mandalorian, who were fine.
Oh no, that's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, the guy who was playing Luke in the most recent version, or I want to say it was in
Book of Boba Fett.
Book of Boba Fett. The body double who did that was fine. He looked, honestly, even without the dots all over his face, like, he looks just like Mark Hamill, like, so it's like, just let him play the character. Like,
yeah, let him play that role.
Just let him do it. It's okay.
Yeah, let other people play these characters. Plus, like the digital mask thing, it was a nice experiment, but we badly need to let it go.
No,
like,
100%.
The problem with Solo was not that they recast Han Solo and Lando Calrissian.
Yeah.
That was not the issue, clearly, because they're making a Lando movie.
Right.
That clearly was not the problem. The problem with Solo was because, one, it was rushed out on the back of The Last Jedi, which was not a movie that you want to follow 5 months later. So it got no marketing, no promotion. It barely had time to get things on the shelves. It was a misguided attempt to try to turn Star Wars into Marvel, to where we could have multiple movies a year. And we see how fucking well that has worked out for Marvel recently. That was a bad fucking idea. The problem with Solo was not the performances in the movie. It was a myriad number of other factors. So that's my hot take. I love this character. I love every time he speaks, he has interesting things to say, and I badly want to see more of him. Again, whether that's in a novel form or comic form, Lucasfilm, I am available. I know I just turned down a gig, but for you, I will always make room in my schedule. You may call me. I am available. My Twitter DMs are open. You know how to reach me, Lucasfilm.
Anyway. I think what they need to do is they need to do a recast for season 2. They need to do a book just to give him like a really good story. Like,
I want his backstory.
Yeah, I was saying
I want to know what the fuck he was up to.
Or a Tales of the Jedi for him.
No. Hold on. You know who they should give his backstory to? You know who should write that book? Delilah S. Dawson.
Oh, I mean, yeah, because
Delilah S. Dawson
she
or
did such a
Kevin
good job,
Scott.
yeah. Yeah.
Kevin Scott or George Mann. Those are the three that I would like to tackle this character. Delilah Dawson, Kevin Scott, and George Mann. I
Okay,
know you're not as familiar with George Mann because
yeah.
he's kind of new to Star Wars, but he's very good.
Yeah, I'm gonna text Delilah real quick. I'm just gonna ask her.
To text Delilah Dawson real quick and be like, "Hey, can you talk to
Can
your
you
agent
please,
about talking to
yeah,
Del Rey?"
can you just
No.
pull your strings there and just kind of make it happen?
I think that Balin and Shen have been two of the more interesting new characters that have been introduced, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens with them. Clearly, there's stories in mind, and Dave has said that there's stories in mind.
Sure.
But we'll see what happens. Maybe if your tarot card reading at the beginning of the episode was correct, we'll get our season 2 announcement soon.
Well, because I think I just actually read something that Rosario Dawson just said that she's about to have dinner with the entire cast soon because they've all been busy with like cons and stuff. And so this is the first time they're all going to get back together since the show has wrapped. So I think that she might be talking about season 2 stuff. Like they might be giving them like a, hey, this is what we're going to do.
Okay, so I did find a Screen Rant article. I'm not fond of Screen Rant. They framed it as a disappointing update. Apparently, she was directly asked if she's been having conversations. She said no, but that she's supposed to be having dinner soon with the whole cast. The article then, because this is what Screen Rant does, spins this out into an entire thing about how she didn't mention any of the crew or the creators, and then speculates for multiple paragraphs.
Well,
so that's the update as far as we know.
Like Screen Rant, but
right. Oh, Christ. Screen
so,
Rant.
Before we get into our final thoughts, would you like to know who directed this episode?
I would love to know, now that we're back to TV, who wrote and directed this episode.
So this was directed by Steph Green. She has directed multiple TV episodes before of other shows, notably Watchmen on HBO and The Americans on FX. In terms of queer things, she directed multiple episodes of The L Word, Generation Q on Showtime. And she actually has directed episodes of Luke Cage, season 2 for Marvel. So that was interesting. And she has directed a Star Wars before. She directed the second episode of Book of Boba Fett.
The best Boba Fett episode.
So yes. There you go.
She directed the best Boba Fett episode.
And like I said on the top, or when we were talking about the actor, our new actor, this episode, Peter Jacobson, she directed him in The Americans, in the episodes that she did for that show. So I thought that was interesting. They were together. And Steph Green is also our first non-Dave Filoni director of the season.
Yay!
So, and there's
I wondered why the direction of this episode is suddenly incredible.
Yeah,
because we didn't talk about it a lot. We didn't talk about it a lot because rather like the Mandalorian, I keep saying the Mandalorian, rather like the Book of Boba Fett, it's relatively understated and relatively subtle. Like when she needs to direct an action scene, it's very tensed, it's very well paced, it's very well choreographed, but she's also really good at directing actors.
And I also think it's a very tough job to be the director for the second episode after the first pilot episode essentially is directed by the creator of the show. You know, it's such a hard act to follow usually.
Which she's now done twice.
Right? Yes.
She done Book of Boba Fett, and she did it here. And she will also, this will not be the last episode of Ahsoka she will direct.
Right, which is nice. So, yeah, I'm excited
to see.
Who
wrote this fucking episode?
Well, Dave Filoni.
Okay, thank you. I am also excited to see where Steph Green goes with the direction here.
I keep avoiding saying who it was written by because I was like, we all know.
We all know.
We just fucking know.
We know. We'll tell you when that changes. Right. If that changes. And look, I don't want to say, I get that this is Dave Filoni's baby. This is a story he wants to tell. I'm not going to tell him, you can't tell this story. You have to go hands off. Writers' rooms are not just everybody breaks. It's not a fucking relay race. I need to dispel this myth about writers' rooms. It's not a fucking relay race. You can have a singular vision from the showrunner who handles the overall, that's how TV shows work. It helps divide up the workload. It helps have other voices in the room. It helps have other perspectives in the room. It helps have people who can really focus on dialogue and really focus on scenes, really focus on pacing, and make sure that everything is good consistently across the board. So when we say Dave Filoni needs a writer's room, it does not mean Dave Filoni is a bad writer. Dave Filoni is a pretty good writer. He knows what he's doing, and he's a really damn good showrunner. But when we say Dave Filoni needs a writer's room, what I mean is Dave Filoni needs other people helping him out, because it's the difference between one person trying to run a business. Like imagine like a shop, like a donut shop. It's the difference between one person trying to run a donut shop and having 3 or 4 people operating the donut shop. One of them's going to go a lot smoother and make better donuts. That's just the nature of these things. So Dave Filoni is not a bad writer. Dave Filoni needs a writer's room so that the show can be even better. Dave Filoni also needed 2 more episodes, but that's not down to him. That's down to the Disney executives. Anyway, that was a rant. Do you want to do your final thoughts first, Bradley?
Yeah, I'll do my final thoughts. So I really enjoyed this episode. I thought the when it wanted to be an action episode, it was an action episode and it was great. The Merrick Ahsoka fight was just it was so good, but it was like I can't help but in retrospect look back on it and be like, why? Why? Other than to just be this is cool. I still enjoy. I just, it just sucks. What we know later on. As for, just like I said, little nitpicky things, I just thought that it was just like a little bit too much of a extension of episode 1, and it was like a weird, like, I don't know, because we didn't talk about this, but this was a double premiere.
It is a double premiere.
So which I don't like when Disney does double premieres. It pisses me off, honestly. I mean, don't get me wrong. At the time, I enjoy it because I'm like, fuck yeah, we get to watch 2 episodes of Ahsoka back to back. Since we've been waiting almost like a year and a half, 2 years for this fucking show, and we're like ready for it. However, I just don't like do that. I want episodes to stand on their own by themselves and not need anything from the previous episode, but it is what it is. I like it. It was a decent episode. What about you?
My final thoughts on the episode are this is the episode that makes it really apparent this is going to be a serial, and more particularly, this is going to be one story that is broken up into 8 episodes. I don't like that. Personally, I think that makes structuring episodes hard, and we'll see to it particularly when we get to some of the middle episodes of the show. But every episode of a serial needs to have an internally consistent narrative arc. That even if it is a show that is, building on the previous episode, not an episode that can be taken in isolation, it has to have its own internal narrative journey. This one had that journey for Sabine. I feel like because of the length of the episode, because of the time they were given, and various other factors, I felt like Ahsoka really didn't have the same narrative arc, or at least not one that was clear. She had the one nice little scene where she talks to Hera, and that's about all we get, really, a direct exploration of her character in this episode. So I felt like it was weaker than the first episode. It's certainly not the weakest episode of the series. Sabine has a very clear narrative journey. We also have a clear central mystery that we have resolved by the end of the episode. Is it a complicated mystery? No, but it is a mystery, and we solved it by the end of the episode, and we have transitioned into our next episode. So, I mean, I continue to enjoy watching the show, and my perspective of the show, taking it episode by episode, continues to be, I really like every scene individually. I'm reminded of that quote, actually, that's doing the rounds, the line from Mary Poppins: though we adore men individually, we agree that as a group they're rather stupid. And that's kind of how I feel about the Ahsoka show. Every individual element of the show is really good to me. I wouldn't call it stupid, like I would call men stupid. I would call it complex. I would call it structurally unsound at parts. Yeah, just because, if you're taking an episode as a whole, that's where I run into problems. Versus, I will ultimately marathon this entire show before we do our finale episode. And I think that's going to be the most positive experience I've had with the show yet, is the ability to sit down and watch all 8 episodes and see the coherent story. Because even now, going through these episodes scene by scene, I'm starting to understand, oh, okay, this is what they were going for. But also here's kind of why it didn't come across when I first watched the episode. So I do not have anything to plug other than For Light and Dice, which For Light and Dice, because of scheduling issues, we have actually now released all of the content again that we've previously recorded. So if you catch up on For Light and Dice, you will get as far as we are in the game, as far as we know as players. We're recording a behind the scenes episode literally tomorrow. I don't know when that's going to come out, but it's just a moment to breathe. There's a lot happening in some people's real lives. That show will be back in a couple of weeks with more continuing, but I continue to highly recommend this show. Shout out to the person on Twitter who called it their favorite High Republic story. Thank you. That is a great honor.
That's cool.
But no, it is going to some fantastic emotional places, and I could not recommend it enough. I will have another thing to announce, hopefully very, very soon. Bradley, what are we still promoting for you?
What I'll say is you can watch most of my shows on Peacock and Bravo, but of the current one, we'll just do one for now. I'll just plug Married to Medicine season 10 is currently airing on Bravo and Peacock. So we'll just say that's the current plug.
So it's so funny. I don't know if I've told you this, but my Twitter feed is largely a collection of A, people I know in real life, B, other fan people that I interact with, and C, men I find attractive.
Sure.
And the number C category, the letter C category, men I find attractive, a lot of them are talking about Married to Medicine. It's either Married to Medicine or Real Housewives right now.
Right.
Because apparently some dramatic bombshell happened on Real Housewives the other night.
Yeah.
But it's that and Married to Medicine. Every time Married to Medicine comes up on my feed, I'm like, oh yeah, that's that show that Bradley worked on.
Yeah.
So shout out to all the hot people who are watching Married to Medicine. Bradley worked on it. All right. Well, we'll be back next week for episode 3 of Ahsoka. And Bradley, go ahead and run the socials. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gays. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongays@gmail.com to let us know. You can also find us on Twitter at @goldsquadgays, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at @goldsquadrongays. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gays YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gays, and we'll see you next week.
My actual only thing that I cared about when I was watching is when they actually have the hole in the arch, like when there's an actual hole.
Of course you
I
would
was like,
care about the whole first and foremost, above all else.